Action.
How did the band form?
It's
a
a
long answer.
Mike's best at answering this.
I've gotten better at it because when we first used to be asked that question and I would try to explain it,
You got a couple hours?
I would confuse myself and I would get confused. But it helps. Okay, so the three of us that you're looking at right now are the three members of the band that are from Buffalo, New York, which is where the idea for the band kind of started forming, like, just talking amongst the three of us, like, hey, wouldn't it be cool to play in a band together? And we've always been friends, and we all like music, and these guys were playing in a band together. And it was just sort of something we talk about when you go get coffee or go get dinner or something. And completely independent of that, in 2010, I moved out to Las Vegas with family. It wasn't motivated by forming a band or anything. And came out and started playing around town, by myself with an acoustic guitar, a lot downtown, and sort of started to see that, hey, this is a lot of cool stuff going on around here, and it was inspiring me. So I sort of thought, let's reignite that conversation about forming that band that we had sort of kicked around, and wouldn't it be crazy if you guys came down and maybe we played a show together and just see how it goes. And
From Buffalo.
Yeah, from Buffalo. Like take a flight down to visit. Like I said, we're friends and stuff. So come down and visit. I'll show you around this new place that I'm in, and maybe we could play a show at one of these cool venues, which we did, and we played at a show at the Bunkhouse, and these guys went back to Buffalo, and we continued the conversation and started to think maybe we can actually form a band together, and maybe they would be interested in coming down here and putting it together, even if it's something that hey, let's try it out. I don't know, maybe you're at an age and a situation maybe where you can take a little bit of say, well, let me put that stuff on hold at home and come out and try this thing and see what we have here. And so they came out and ended up deciding to stay and form the band and take it seriously. And that was really the formation of the band. And then from there it developed, and we found all the other pieces that we needed. And the two guys that aren't here, John and Corey, came on a little bit later and are not from Buffalo.
Okay.
But we still want to bring them back home sometime.
Are you the only original members?
Yeah, we are the only two. We started with another Buffalo guy, Ryan.
Did they get fired or quit? Or what happened?
What if we fired people?
Yeah, you're not getting paid anymore. We're never getting paid. With Ryan, with our original drummer Ryan, who, as Mike mentioned, was also from Buffalo. He just was ready to move on. He parted ways with it. It was his decision ultimately. And then with Danny, our previous bassist, our original bassist, it was more of a mutual thing. He was other things were kind of coming into his life, and it became tougher and tougher for both us and him. So we just had a very friendly conversation about it, and it made the most sense.
Okay.
And it coordinated with us with the timing worked out where we had someone who was kind of filling in for Danny. It was Corey. And at first we weren't sure that he would be interested in doing it full time. We didn't think, well, it was going very well with him. We just didn't think he had the time himself, but we just said, hey, you want to be a full-time guy? And he was very much interested, so that's where we're at.
Now, I'm curious about the name of the band. Is there a place in Buffalo called Avalon Landing?
No. Basically, Avalon Landing is a reference to both a book and a movie. So I think everyone's aware of Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
By J.D. Salinger. There's a movie called Finding Forrester. I like how you explain this. You did a really good job with this. But basically, there's a movie called Finding Forrester. You do it better than me. And in that movie, it's very loosely based on J.D. Salinger. Essentially, it's a reclusive author who's just kind of hidden away and never exposed to the world until the main character comes along, and that changes things. But basically, he wrote a book in the movie called Avalon Landing, and it references both Finding Forrester and it pretty much is Catcher in the Rye for the movie. Okay. So that's what it references. It's a movie that, especially back then, I really, really liked, and all three of us really liked Catcher in the Rye. So I kind of came up with that years ago before we formed this band, and I had mentioned it to Mike way before we were going to start this thing, and he said, "Hey, that's a cool name for a future band." So
I've never seen the movie, guys.
yeah, that's great.
It's a good one. We never had to actually sit down and come up with a band name, which is like
Nice.
the hardest thing sometimes.
Yeah.
Like when a band forms,
Yeah.
that just kind of came. That was like it came with the idea, and you know, it was just something we didn't have to worry about.
Yeah.
And I'm glad, because it sounds really hard to come up with a band name.
Yeah, that's,
I mean, coming up with an album name is hard enough.
Yeah.
Imagine a band name.
Okay. Who are your musical influences and in the mainstream, and do you like anybody in town as far as solo or sopranos?
This question's always difficult to answer. Basically, what we like to say is we're more influenced and inspired by anybody being creative at all. That's more of an influence to us than anything on the radio, even some of our favorite bands that we listen to all the time. I feel like it's just like you go to a local show, and Mike would attest to this too, very much so. Then you go to like a random open mic night, and there's just a guy playing a song, and as Mike always tells this, like it's just like it's raw. It's like he's playing it for the first time. It's just there's nothing but the song and that guy playing it, and there's just something really inspiring about that. So I think we get more out of that than, you know, Death Cab for Cutie or, you know, bands that we grew up loving. Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, there's for me like if I go back and say what got me into like music in general, just being a young kid, and my parents liked old like Motown stuff, or my mom did, and so I got really into that, and it made me want to, you know, I want to be a singer, you know, because of that. And then what got me into songwriting was more like bands like Blink-182 and the Ataris, where it was like, oh, I'm having, you know, you're in high school and, you know, some girl screws with you and you want to write a song about it, and it was like that was that motivation. So those are the influences for that, but I mean I really haven't listened to that stuff a lot recently. And I'm in a really weird spot with like when somebody asks what musical influences, because I'm looking for something in music, some feeling, something that I just haven't felt in a while with like what's coming out and stuff.
There, to me, with certain bands are exceptions, but since 2000 there hasn't really been anything that great.
And I wonder how much of that is just getting older, and like when you're younger, you're more susceptible to being blown away by something, and then your skin gets thicker as you get older, and then it's just like, well, these are my favorite bands. This new stuff is never going to be as good as Clarity by Jimmy Eat World. You know, it's just one of those things, and I'm very much in the same boat. I feel like I find myself trying really hard to like certain albums, and it's not quite there for me. And then there are other times where I'm not paying attention at all, and then I you know, Spotify will lead me to some random song that I absolutely love. But it's becoming rarer and rarer, which is why I think it kind of brings us back to, you know, when you're having conversations with your friends about music, that's more inspiring. You know, there's a documentary, a Wilco documentary. I don't like Wilco at all as a band. Like, I mean, I do now a little bit, but I mean, when I first saw the documentary, like, I didn't know anything about Wilco, but it's the struggle. It's watching people who've succeeded, doing the things that we want to be successful at, and succeeding at it. Watching them struggle, and especially like Mike reads a lot of music bios, about, and this doesn't even necessarily need to be musicians, comedians, anything creative that's, you know, not a 9-to-5 job. You're just trying to make it, make a career in what you love, and it's just hard to do. And to watch people who've succeeded in that struggle and go through the same exact stuff as us, that's like, okay, it just feels good to relate to that. You know, that's way more inspiring than, you know, some records I've listened to recently. You know.
Well, you guys are so thorough, and I mean, I'm
just on a personal level.
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, I think I'm with, you know, Josh and Mike in a way that, you know, it's all sorts of different types of media that influence us. You know, like, you could be watching a movie and one particular line could strike you as really heavy, or you know, and it could lead you into this whole, you know, idea for a single song, or a feel for something, or a certain aesthetic that you want to achieve. you know, and it, like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be from music, but it can be from movies or television or wherever. So I think influence-wise, we all sort of keep ourselves open to everything in our lives sort of coming into this room and helping us create the songs that we make.
Yeah, it's a process that's always going on. Like for me, anytime somebody tells me to check out a song, it's kind of a joke I've been making the last couple of months, but where I just go in and I get bored with it because I just know it's going to be chords and it's going to be melodies and it's going to be lyrics and it's going to be some variation of that, regardless of what style or what genre. That's what it's going to be. And I sit there and I consciously think to myself, like, what is that thing you're looking for that is a song? You know, it doesn't have those things. Like, that's why I get bored with music, and it sounds so silly, but it's really hard when you sit down with your guitar and you're like, okay, I want to write something, and that fills the void that maybe I feel for what's out there. And it's like you give myself a guitar and say, okay, write a song, but you can't use melody, chords, and lyrics. It's like, but I love that because I feel like at the end of that tunnel of just whatever that means, there's going to be some well of something that I'm going to find, and that's what's exciting and what keeps you going with like working on your craft a little bit. It's one thing to say, hey, we found out what works, like let's do it. And I think all of us are always searching for more things to inspire us. So whether it's just a song that you hear or a specific band, like say, hey, the music of Death Cab for Cutie influenced the way that we wrote these songs or the sound of these songs, like that's great. But what's fun is everybody in the band has a desire to explore deeper than that, and that's what's really exciting.
Do you guys have any bands or artists in town that you like?
Yeah, there's great bands in town, and the other bands that exist in this town are really the reason that we exist, because like I said, when I came down and would go mostly in the downtown area when Neon Reverb was at its height, and there was the one show that the Walkman headlined at Beauty Bar, and just like seeing all those local bands is what inspired me to, because I had never played in a band before, and I never really wanted to, because it was in my mind it was like, well, bands, they get together and they break up and it's a waste of time. I would rather just try to get out something that's in my head myself. But seeing these bands and seeing what a band can do and all that inspired me. I mean, specifically, if you want like specific ones, Kid Meets Cougar was always a band that I loved seeing, and and then I know they're not really active so much anymore, or at least it doesn't seem that they are. So I always look up to Rusty Maples. I think they do.
I just saw that. Yeah.
They to me just from even back when we first got down here, they were. I mean, it was the Schooners. There was a lot of crossover in the members. I like their music, but I just respect their attitude and the way they are, and they're cool. And that's kind of always one when I talk about which bands locally I look up to. They are definitely one of them. But there's no shortage of really great bands here and anywhere. Like in the local scene, when you get in there, you're always going to have people doing really great things. Yeah. That's for me. I mean, do you guys have?
Yeah. I mean, I would agree about Rusty. It's just certainly a respect thing. Mm-hmm. Another band, Almost Normal, recently become really, really good friends with the drummer Andrew and Ashley. Just great people, great songwriters, and yeah, it's just a respect thing. Like both Rusty and Almost Normal and Echo become friends with recently. We did the Hard Rock Rising contest and met him there. They're just all hardworking. That's what's cool. And there are some bands in this across the board, all over the country. There's some bands that have a lot of talent but don't necessarily have the work ethic. And it's cool to see certain bands that have the talent and work really hard too. So I would say Rusty, Almost Normal, and Echo.
That's what's great, and specifically about Echo, is that when we did the Hard Rock Rising contest, and what was really great about him specifically is that here was this like contest thing, and everybody kind of pins like the groups against each other, and it's like even within the contest, like if we made it to a certain point, like and someone else didn't, there would be this sort of, hey, make sure you take them down, and it's not, like, for the bands that are in it, and what's really great about him specifically is that what came out of that was a really great friendship between, specifically him and Josh. They just did a song together, and it was like, that's what, when that happens between, like, the local acts, because it can sometimes be difficult with local musicians working together sometimes, whether it's just ego or cliques or whatever the case may be, but
or just a disconnect.
There's just something, but with him specifically, it was just this, hey, we're in this Hard Rock Rising thing together, and let's be happy for whoever wins. Like, that's not what it's about. It's about we came out of that and have a really great relationship, and I don't know. It's just really fun. It makes this whole thing worth it on a different level than what happens in this room writing songs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in addition to being very talented, like running into artists who are open-minded and just positive, that's what's great.
That's funny you say that, because part of why I started the magazine was because I saw I disconnect with. It was very like secular and like compartmentalized.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And like everybody was doing their own thing, not caring about other people, but just caring about their stuff so much that they didn't think about everybody else.
Yeah, right.
And I was thinking, if I do this, I'm trying to help people, and if everybody helps everybody wins.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not necessarily especially music. It's not a competition where like you're in a race to like beat somebody, because we're all sort of, there's room. If you're good at what you do and you work hard, there's room for everyone to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's not like a set amount of spaces at the top, where, if someone gets in one of those spots and that's it, you're done. It's you're not always going to get there at the same time, but you can always help each other and push other artists and help. A lot of times it helps push your own direction and drive into a certain place that maybe you didn't think you were actually going to get to. So definitely that, it's that kind of thing where having positive people remind you that it's not necessarily like beating each other out of certain things. It's good to have that.
Yeah.
So.
What is the writing process for songs? Who generally writes the lyrics and the music, and does someone bring the song as part of a song, and then you generally build it around it, or how does that work?
Right now it's kind of all over the place. It's like we're kind of almost in experiment mode in terms of how the process is coming together. But generally, for the record we put out for Reside, it was if it's a song that I'm singing on, it was something that I put the progressions and melody, at least partially, and lyrics together a little bit, and we'd bring it to practice, and then we'd have to turn it into a song. We'd arrange it and make decisions about the arrangement, about the structure of the song as a band. Mm-hmm. And so it was the same situation with Mike. If he was sitting at home and playing his guitar and came up with a chord progression and a melody and some lyrics that he liked, even if it's not necessarily the whole song, we'd bring in a chunk of that, just pretty much bring in a chunk of music or an idea into the room and just working it out in the room with everybody and adding the appropriate instruments and the appropriate arrangement. Now recently it's been all over the place. We wanted to make an effort to get the beginning point of songs with at least the three of us in the room, or like everybody in the room, so that the origin of the idea of the song wasn't necessarily just me or Mike being like by ourselves and then bringing the idea to the room. We wanted to experiment with just trying to write from scratch, whether it's a melody or a lyric, and that's pretty new. Usually it's like a musical idea. If we come up with something in the room with everybody, it's usually like an instrumentation idea. But earlier on this year, we were experimenting with actually trying to write lyrics together for a little bit, trying to write melodies together. Mike and I, and Clayton too, we all write independently because it's just what we love doing. And what we want to start doing is anytime we have practice, no matter what, if it's strictly for rehearsal, just trying to set aside even 20 minutes to just try and come up with something brand new, so that we have something. It's always interesting and fresh for us, and there's more creative ideas being thrown around.
Okay.
It could be a challenge. I mean, you just think you throw a bunch of musicians into a room and you're guaranteed to get something, and you put a band together and you just start cranking out songs, but it can be really hard,
You need chemistry.
Yeah, and it's something where it's like everything that we'll talk about it's always a process that you're going through, and like when we say like, well, let's just get into the room and write a song together, everybody in the band is a writer in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you think, well, you throw those together and bam, you're going to get the best of everybody in this song, and it doesn't necessarily work that way, because it's a totally different monster, when you're sitting by yourself and you're free to come up with whatever you want, versus I have this idea for a lyric and everybody's trying to think of something. And
build around it.
Yeah, because the second you put that thought in your head that it's going to be presented to somebody, it runs it through this filter. And I think the key is to not have that, but it is a process that you sort of have to deal with. So but for us is that we're all so comfortable and supportive of each other, and truthfully, it's not just saying that, but you're still going to have those, whether it's your own insecurities or your own whatever, or I'm sitting over here going, I want to write a song that doesn't have lyrics, chords, and melodies. What do you guys think? How do I fit that into the context of what we're doing? And maybe on a day, any one of us comes over and says, hey, I have this song, and it's pretty much all laid out. Whatever material goes into making the Avalon Landing song, the way that I think of it is, if somebody comes to the table, whether it's Josh or Clayton or John or Corey or anybody, and says, hey, here's a bunch of songs that I just wrote and I want to use for the band, it's like, if you're finding something in there, keep running that register, and let's bring it into the band.
Let's explore.
Yeah, and for me, I write a chord and a melody, and I bring it in, and maybe Clayton comes up with a guitar riff, and the whole reason that people like that song is because of the guitar riff.
Which I think is what might happen with our most recent song written.
Clayton is writing some good riffs.
It's true.
But that's the thing, is it's like you look at it, and people sometimes say that, oh, that song is a Josh song, or it's a Mike song because of who's singing, that's who's voices up front. Mm-hmm. But it's really not that, because a lot of times what makes the song is some element of it that the person who came with the idea really had nothing to do with. Mm-hmm. But that's what's so exciting, and you give away a little of yourself. There can be no ego, there can be none of that. And for us, what we have as far as where we can draw from writing, I don't think that we've even tapped the fullest potential yet, and it's a good thing, because hopefully this band will be going on for a long time, and we'll need to, you don't want the wells to dry up, and we have a ton of wells, and it's just we don't know how to access them yet, but it doesn't mean that we won't. And that's, again, coming back to how I end everything, that's what's so exciting about it.
Do you find that there is any ego at all in the band, or no? Because that is a problem as far as...
Yeah, it's totally. Honestly, if there is, I haven't noticed it. I mean, honest, we're all just really supportive of each other.
That just lends itself to arguments, and that's how bands work out.
Yeah, we don't argue a lot. If there's any disagreements or whatever, it's something that we've had, honestly, even when we're putting together Reside, the record, and decisions on the album that we would sort of say, a band vote on it, and people are butting heads, and we would sit there and get nowhere with it for 2 hours, but nobody would ever raise their voice. It was just a conversation, and I think part of it has to do with mutual respect, whatever, but it's that we are close friends, and if anything, if an argument happens or somebody's just feeling down on something or whatever, we can manage our
there's a balance. We're not
emotions.
We all get along, but we don't necessarily have all this exact same personality. So there's a certain balance. If someone's bummed out, everyone else can support, and vice versa. So I think it's a really, really good balance. The other thing is we were friends for a very, very long time before we were ever in a band together, at least with all three of us. Mm-hmm. And there's a mature factor too. We're just older. If we're 17, there could be a lot of arguments. we'd be less mature, we'd be less capable of getting through a disagreement without fighting. But so I think it's just a maturity factor and the fact that we've been friends for a long time, and it's very much a respect thing. So,
Okay.
yeah.
What was it like recording your album? Was there any hard or easy? Was it fun or was it hard? Or?
Both.
Yeah.
Very much both.
Really?
The recording's like simultaneously the most fun thing that you can do and the most stressful thing in the world, because you're finally getting the songs exactly the way you want them, and you're putting them into this recorded format that is going to represent the band for at least a year, if not longer, if not forever. And so it's high stress. You want it to sound good, you want it to come out the right way, you want it to represent you well, and but at the same time, it's like the most creative, fun thing hearing it. If it's going well, it's coming out the way you want it, and so you're like getting super excited. And Mike and I especially, we're both in like sort of musical positions where we're like, I'm stepping into stepped into, I guess it's been quite a while now, more of a lead guitar position, and he's in a position in a band where he's having to write guitar parts and stuff, and so we're constantly pushing ourselves to be better and sort of progressing through these obstacles and hurdles and stuff where you're learning and trying to record at the same time and all this stuff. So there's a whole lot of different stuff going on. You guys can probably...
That's exactly it, though. It's every like fun, hard, stressful, challenging. It's all of that, and there are points during the process where you get so frustrated and whatever.
Sometimes.
But then there's it's just again like, and I don't know if it was Brian that said that, or you probably got it from somewhere else, but just enjoying the process and realizing like what you're creating. Because for me, the week that we recorded my rhythm guitar parts was ridiculous. I think like my hair was like up on end, and I was just like walking around like shaking, because it was just like, I've never recorded like that before, where you're sitting there and you could take the part that you've played so many times live effortlessly, and you go there in a setting where somebody's recording it, and like Clayton said, this is going to be what is on the record, and the most simplest guitar part feels like it's like because you're so focused, and then beyond that, for me, like this is my my first band experience, so it was my first experience recording a record like that, where we had a pre-production process where you take all of the songs and take them apart and put them back together in every possible way and see what way is the best way. And that was something that I had never done before, because my process was usually get the words, get the melody out, throw some chords under it, and let's go out and play it. And that's as far as I would think about it. And I certainly had moments where I sat there going, why does it matter what the hi-hat is doing there? Why does it matter? And I remember, and it was a great explanation, as our producer Brian said, think of a painting and what you see when you look at it in a gallery or something, and you sort of notice what's on the surface. But in the back of the painting, there's a little barn. What we're doing in pre-production is zooming in on the door of the barn and deciding which way the grain of the wood can go. He said, ultimately, it won't matter when it's all said and done. Most people won't notice that, but all those little pieces are going to contribute to the greater work. And that's where I look at it, and I sort of understood it. And I said, okay, this is a great learning opportunity for me, because I had never done that before. And I'm definitely somebody, even to this day, if we record something and you have the metronome going, and it's like, hey, that was slow, or that was fast, or that was slightly out of tune, and I just don't hear it, it frustrates the hell out of me, but I know it's for the good of everything, and that it's not, that it's, again, a process. And you slowly start learning that. Now, we go through that recording process, and we come out of it a profoundly different band, really. Like when you're done recording it, because you've been opened up to all these new things and trying all sorts of stuff. And I remember my friend from back home like recorded a couple of songs and just sent them to me. And I responded back, I was like, they're cool, you should just try different stuff. Like take that progression you used in the bridge and put it over the last chorus.